I wanted to kind of split today up into two different parts. And with the first part, which will probably be more like a half an hour's long, I'm going to kind of finish off where I left off from last August when I did the drum tuning and drum head changing workshop that I did. How many of you guys were at that? A lot of you guys. I see some familiar faces. I'm going to tell you in a second where you can watch that if you didn't see it. So that's the first half, more of the equipment side of things. We're talking about some gear, some drums, and things like that. And then the second half, I'm going to just get right into worship drumming and two things. Talk about maybe how you can more effectively speak to your drummer, and number two, just like what to listen for in a worship drummer, like at an audition or during rehearsal. I'm going to give you my perspective, which is kind of on the other side of things, being a drummer myself, and so maybe you'll take away some things today that are going to be different. That maybe go, oh, that's kind of cool, or maybe you'll be like, I ain't doing that, and that's fine. So I would just say take away whatever's going to work for you in your situation. So, all right, getting into things. There's two handouts, like I said. There's this one, which is like the outline. So if you got that, that's going to basically cover the outline of what I'm going to be doing, what I'm going to be talking about today. So you can take notes in that and just kind of follow along with that. The other one says, I think the top says rhythm terms. And that's just a supplemental thing, and I'm going to be talking about that in the part two when I'm talking about worship drumming, so you can just kind of put that aside for now. On the main outline here, the first thing is two links, okay? And the first one is for rockumentation. So that's been the place where recently I've put all my info for drumming, for gear, all drum-related things. So that's either a document, it's a link to a video, it's a picture, and a lot of stuff that I'm going to be talking about today is in rockumentation and maybe even more expanded upon. So you can go check that out. If you got the PDF on Slack, there's a hyperlink that you can click on that'll take you right to it. And then the next link is for YouTube, and that is of the drum tuning and drum head changing workshop that I did last August. And I edited that down from like an hour and a half to an hour, so it's a lot more easy to take it all in, I think. But I'm going to be referring back to that because that dealt more with the drums themselves and a lot of the drum sound in particular that we're going for. So I don't want to like recap a lot of that just because of time's sake. So I'd recommend just going and refreshing, getting a refresher on that, or to, if you haven't seen it at all, go check that out. But I did kind of want to review, if you will, and just recap sort of our vision of what we're trying to do. Now, this isn't just with drums. I think a lot of this is also with all our instruments on our campuses and a lot of what we do here. So the first thing, excellence mindset of worship leaders, drummers, and tech. So what do I mean by that? Well, we all know excellence being one of our core values. We talk about excellence being, doing the best with what you have. And we talk, excellence, just the word is kind of self-evident. It just means something of a high quality. But music is artful, and there's different opinions on what sounds good and what we're going for, right? So it's sometimes hard to zero in on that. Now, the style of music we're doing, worship music, I say that's in the pop style of music. It has almost like parameters and boundaries with what it maybe should sound like. There's almost an objectivity to that. And again, when I talk about the drum sound itself, go watch that other video. I talk about the anatomy of a drum sound, from the attack portion of the sound to the middle portion of the sound to the sustain. What's going to be important between those three people, and probably some others, but on your campuses, that's what's going to be important. Those three people should be involved. They should be communicating together. They should have a great friendships and working relationships. They should be talking to each other and working together on the vision of, and really kind of agreeing in general with what we're going for, okay? There needs to be some agreement, I think, on it. And so we're thinking of like a marriage between stick to speaker, okay? It's kind of the way I think of it. You want to have your drummer be playing well and be playing consistently, because a lot of that starts with them. There's sometimes when you're like, man, just things aren't sounding as good as last week, right? But sometimes that's your player, right? I mean, it really can start with them and maybe some things that they need to work on, as a musician. And then we have the drum kit, okay? So the drum kit needs to be tuned and maintained and taken care of and sounding good. And then the chain goes, down the line, mics, cables, preamps, converters, all the electronic stuff, to the soundboard, to the speaker, to the front house person, okay? And that's a long chain that needs to be taken care of. And, that's how it is for every instrument. But I think drums in particular is a challenging thing, right? Because you've got a plethora of mics. You have all these different voices and instruments all trying to blend together. So it sometimes takes more time than maybe another instrument, possibly, to get right. I'm going to just give props to Jordan real quick because many times I'll see Jordan and he'll come over and he'll say, hey man, we're trying out this new snare drum, or we're trying out these new drum heads or new cymbals. And they already have a great drum sound there, and I appreciate the fact that he's always trying to make it better. But he's got all those three people there intentionally working together to improve the sound. And many times it's before rehearsal, they come in either before or after. And so it's just extra time to do, but it really makes a difference. Our drum sound, and this is me maybe being a little bit of a drummer, but I know a lot of you would agree that our drum sound is so important to making the music feel the way it should in the house with the establishing a groove and all those sorts of things. And so the drummer, the sound guy, and also, like I said, the worship leader, your job is to, right now is to be, you're responsible for the kits at your campuses. And even if you're not the person tuning it all the time or changing the heads, maybe you got somebody else doing that, another drummer that you empower to do that. I think that you still need to know kind of what's going on. Don't just hand it off completely. Be involved. I would say this, to watch that other tuning video I did, know how to do simple tuning on your drums. I think that's going to be really important because, and we talked about last time about going to your kit maybe every Wednesday or Thursday, whenever your rehearsal is, sitting down a little bit and just making sure there's nothing major out of whack. We talk about like tension rods that fall out of the bottoms of your drums. There's times I've gotten to a campus and a drum is completely like flat, like this, the head is all wrinkled. It's always good to get up there and help out. So underneath that, there's three things. We just talked about tuning, okay? So don't need to go into that. The drums need to be tuned on a regular basis. The heads need to be changed on a regular basis, okay? And maintenance, okay? So this could be anything from cymbals being cracked on your kits to parts broken. Kivana and Manny, you guys had a snare drum that was broken. The snare strainer was broken on it. And, you brought it into me and I was able to go order that part and we eventually got it fixed, right? It was back ordered, so that took a while. But a lot of the stuff on a drum kit is very self-evident, I think, in how it needs to be repaired. It's not an extremely, mechanically difficult thing. It's not like, a Tesla, a car or something like that, where it's a lot of the repairs are going to be like, oh, this wing nut is stripped, okay? Or this bass drum string or spring is broken, okay? So a lot of it can be repaired just by kind of looking at it and taking care of it on your own. But I just want you to know I am here. If you need help, I love helping. Contact me, and I'll take you through, a process of, answering questions and consulting, and maybe pointing to you where to buy the part and that sort of thing. Consistency, the last thing here, and of course we talked about consistency and timeliness of changing the heads and repairing things. Obviously, we want to do that. But another aspect to consistency is how potentially you'll have a drummer come in and start changing the tuning right away, okay? Or maybe they're bringing their own snare drum or their own cymbals. Typically, that's going to create an inconsistent sound week after week because you have a drummer that comes in and maybe cranks the tuning of the drums up, and it's going to throw off like what the front of house engineer is hearing. They have like a set of channel strips and chain and a template and things that they probably want to have set up every week. And if you have a drummer coming in and changing those things, then it's going to create an inconsistent sound week after week, okay? What a lot of drummers don't understand maybe right off the bat when they come in to play, and I think, Chris, this is something you mentioned last time, is you have drummers coming from situations that are not like this at all, okay? They're not used to the TLC we give them, and they're not used to the fact that it's not your band coming into some, venue with a house kit and, crappy sound and, where they have to sit at the house kit and do some tuning on their own. They got to bring their own snare. They got to bring their own cymbals. No, we're providing everything for them, and we are giving them an amazing setup, okay? Another reason why they might come in and do that is because they're coming from a different style of music that they maybe typically play, other than worship music. So maybe they play metal. Maybe they play gospel, or maybe it's like classic rock. All three of those styles, I think, it's typical that the drums are tuned to maybe a little bit higher than what we do. I think in worship drumming, at least maybe in the past 10 years or so, the typical worship drum sound is a little lower in tuning than it was like when I was in the 90s. Like I would listen to the bands from the 90s, and the snare sound would be a lot higher in pitched. And now it's a little bit lower. It's just gotten bigger. It's gotten more epic. It's just huger sounding. And so that's different maybe than somebody else would have. So the best thing to do in this case, I would say, is to vision the sound of what we're going for early on in the process of working with your team, okay? So with drums, I would say that maybe not do it at the initial time you meet them at the audition. I would say a good time to maybe do that would be at the first rehearsal. Maybe probably you have people that are new come in early before rehearsal to get them situated. Get them on the kit, show them the Aviom system, tell them what's going on there, and then say, hey, here's our drum kit. Feel free to, adjust the cymbal stands, the height of them, the angle of the snare drum. That's fine. Get comfortable with the kit. We just want to let you know as well, though, that we have so-and-so doing the tuning, so that's something you don't need to do when you come in. We tune to pitches, and we have a specific setup where our front-of-house guy works best with the tuning that we always use week after week. Then we're trying to reach a specific sound, and we feel like we're consistently trying to make that better. So you don't have to use those words. You can say whatever you want to say, but what you're doing is you're giving a specific reason to the process. And when you give a specific reason, then people are like, oh, okay, cool. I understand now. So they may be more on board in the beginning. And then you're going to be able to circumvent that maybe awkward conversation down the road. It's like, oh man, he's tuning the drums. Hey, could you not do that? So, and that's happened to me before. I'm like, oh, I regret not saying something early on, okay? So let's talk a little bit about cymbals, because we didn't get to that last time. So words always fail, right, when you're talking about music terms. You try to explain something to somebody in words. But the best I can do is to say the cymbal sound we're going for is a clear and a warm sound. And this is going to be achieved, I found through the years, even from when I started, things were a little bit different. Sound was a little bit different. Now it's modernized a little bit. That's going to be achieved through either a thin or a medium thin cymbal, usually, or maybe a medium weight cymbal, okay? So that's all relative, but a lot of times on your cymbals, it'll say whether it's what weight it is. It'll say medium thin crash or thin crash, okay? So, and I'll explain this in relation to what we don't want to have as a sound. We don't want it to be, and I have a list here of words, too cutting, too piercing, too loud, too noisy, metallic, trashy, okay? So that could be maybe indicative of like a metal music style where the drummer's cymbals need to cut through the volume of the amps on stage. But of course, we don't have any amps on stage. We just have, the drums are probably the loudest thing. So that's one reason we don't need to do that. We also don't want a cymbal sound to be too dark or dry or dead. Sometimes that's a jazz cymbal, can be like that. They don't have really the explosive quality to it or the high frequencies to do what we want. So that's just another thing you might run into. So 2 things to think about. I get the question once in a while, should I change my cymbals? I also get, should I change my snare drum, okay? And how do I think about that? 2 things to think about. One is maybe a little bit more obvious. Are you having a more of a critical mass of people coming to you and telling you like, hey man, those cymbals, is that working well for you? Or is that, it's not just one drummer that's really opinionated, okay, that's coming and saying, hey, we got to get rid of this. I'm telling you, this is not the way it should be. And then everybody else doesn't say anything. So think about that as a way to, decide whether or not you should start looking for a new cymbal. Another thing, too, is has your room changed recently, okay? So when we got the LED wall here in Mannheim, one of our drummers was playing on a weekend, and I was sitting out here, and I was like, what is going on? Why is the sound from the cymbals so different? It just sounds so honky, like that brassy, And then the next week, it was like that too. And I realized that the reflections from this wall, and this was when we had the wall, it was like full size. It wasn't like the smaller pieces. And I was like, it's got to be the LED wall. And that a thing in your room that will change can make or break things. One time, I don't know if you remember this, Matt, we had and this is before we had the LED wall, when we had sets, we had these like metal panels up here, and I would go and I would do the mix for WJTL in the studio, and I'm listening to the audience mics, and I'm like, what is going on? This is like a completely different thing. So it could harm or could help if you have curtains that you put up, that could maybe help out the sound and deaden some of those things. So those are two things to think about with, should I change the sounds that I have? So just some cymbal manufacturers there. I'm not going to, go over that a ton. But again, if these are brands and models that I think have been great for us at different times. I like all these cymbals. But if you want to know what's maybe the specific differences between them, I'll give you my opinion. Feel free to contact me, and I can talk you through that. Oh, one thing I didn't go over with cymbals was, like I said, check your cymbals for cracks. It's something that you might want to do twice a year or something like that, because if a cymbal cracks, it's basically the kiss of death for our style of music that we're doing. I have a cracked cymbal at home that I use in a lighter setting, and it sounds really good, and it hasn't cracked more. But in our setting where we're doing rock pop, it's going to last maybe about a month, and then it's not going to be usable. So if you see a crack in your cymbal, make sure that you do something about it, in the next week or two. Two types of cracks that you can get are kind of the typical one that runs perpendicular, and I can pass this around. You'll see it on the edge there. It's just going to run perpendicular with the cymbal length. And another type is going to be one that's a little harder to see. And this one runs parallel with these lathing grooves of the cymbal. So here's a crack actually right here. And what you can do is you can hold it up to the light, and you can see the light come through it. And that's one of the ways you can tell that it's there, because you can't really tell, if you're just looking at it. You can also run your hand across, but you can pass that around as well. A cracked cymbal, like I said, it's got a limited lifespan. If you're playing rock on it, it's going to start being more quiet over time. It'll lose its sustain as well. So actually, maybe in the first week, you may be like, this thing sounded better to me. It's not necessarily going to sound really bad right away. But over time, like I said, you're really going to notice a difference, and it's going to need to be replaced. And then if you really wait a long time, it's going to look like a Cookie Monster took a bite out of it. So, all right, cool. That's a great question. I would say that you guys have a local drum shop by you that you frequent, and was that where you bought the kit from?
I meant more the collective we, but yeah.
Yeah. So I would say if there's a drum shop by you locally, go and check out and see what they have. I'm always into buying locally. But I mean, if you don't have a local shop, or if they don't have what you want, I would just say, Sweetwater Sound, okay, our buddy Forrest there can give you a deal on something that will replace what you got. Now, if it's a heartbeat cymbals you will not find them in stores because they're only sold online, and they avoid the middleman, and that's how they can sell them for a little bit cheaper. And that's another reason why I recommend them, because they're a little bit cheaper, but their quality of sound is really good. So that's what I would recommend. If you have a local shop, go to your local shop, Sweetwater Sound, and or like I said, if you want heartbeat cymbals, they're only online. And one more thing with gear is I was thinking maybe it'd be cool to just go over sticks, rods, mallets, brushes, and that sort of stuff. So typically a drummer is going to bring their own sticks or their own things, but it's always good to have a stick bag with stuff in it. So I would say at least like 2 pairs of sticks. And also, I think from there, I think multi-rods are a great thing to have. Does everybody know what these are? I mean, anybody not know what the multi-rods are? Okay, these are great to have in your stick bag, as well as mallets for cymbal rolls. Okay, another thing you can use for these are for toms as well on songs, and this can create a nice contrast during like more of an intimate part of a song. And brushes, this is something that is just an extra voice. These are wire brushes, and so this is going to give you even a lighter sound than the rods will. So for real delicate playing, these can be helpful. Does everybody know what these? Everybody see these before? Okay, so 4 things in your stick bag, I think might be real helpful. Cool. Any questions with part 1? Anything on the gear side of things? Yeah.
I found a great deal on Amazon.
Yeah.
56 for $12.
Wow.
Get those?
That's, yeah, you can if you want to. Are any going to be straight? In all honesty, the price of sticks are very expensive right now. Like we were talking about this, they're like 15, 16 bucks a pair of sticks for Vic Firth. I use a Vic Firth 5B wood tip, and I think these are pretty standard. Like if you have these at your campus, this is going to be a good stick for any drummer to pick up and be like, these are cool. I'll use these. But they are very expensive. And yes, if you buy something really cheap, it's going to be like the banana shape, possibly. So yeah, just be wary of that. Anything else? Any other questions on gear? All right, let's get into the worship drumming part or side of this. And so this is where I want you to take out that supplemental worksheet there, the rhythm handout. So this is from a Zoom training that I did. I don't know, last year I think I did this on rhythms and worship, and I had a couple other people. Jake was there, and Manny, and Allison, and Cameron, and we just talked through some things about rhythms and stuff. But I've adopted that a little bit to this. And so you can see it's rhythm terms, notes and rest chart, rhythm tree diagram, 4/4 rhythms stacked, okay? And what I would say with something like this, I'm not going to go over this thing, piece by piece, but this is something I've tried to curate for you guys if you would so, need to use this for maybe a volunteer you're working with that wants to learn more about rhythms and reading our charts, okay? And what I've done is I've done a couple things there. That first page, those definitions that are capitalized there, that was from my first drum teacher, or my second drum teacher, actually. My first drum teacher was my dad. My second one had these little phrases for everything, okay? And it's like, oh, hey, do you know what a dotted, or what a tied note is? Oh, it's like, yeah, you play the first note and you count the second. Like, that stuck with me. So those are like little definitions I think that could be helpful. And then I have more of the formal definition, like Webster's Dictionary, underneath that to use. The stacked rhythms, okay, that's one of the things that I did where I tried to me, there's a visual, in reading music and written music, there's a visual relationship to sound relationship in reading music, okay? That's one of the things that helped me do it, because I realized it's like, oh, when I have 16th notes that are spaced twice as close together as 8th notes, third played twice as fast. Okay, I get that. Quarter notes, you see them spaced every 4 16th notes, okay? Now, in our charts in a lot of music, obviously you're going to have compressed measures and expanded measures, or compressed phrases and expanded phrases. So what I tried to do here was kind of fix that. And if you take like one of the stacked visuals there, you can run your eye down from beat 1 down through all those rhythms, and they're all going to coincide there. With a lot of those stacks as well, I think at the very top I have either straight 16th notes or straight 8th notes. And that's kind of how I kind of imagine there's always this pulse going on in every song in 4/4, okay? 16th notes. So any note you play rhythmically, like in our style, is going to land on one of those 16th notes. And, and what I've done is I've taken some of our more popular rhythms that you'll see in our worship music, and I've spaced them out to where they go. Does that make sense? It's hard to explain. It's easier to see what I've done. Another thing I've done is I'm a proponent of counting, and that was another thing my drum instructor instilled in me. And I use maybe this is the old method now, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a, or 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I like that method because every sound has, where it's going to be, okay? And so another thing I've done with those rhythmic hits is I've made the actual rhythmic hit that everybody plays in bold and a little bit bigger. And then I have a little bit of ghosting or make those other syllables smaller that I would count but not emphasize. Okay, so let me give you an example. So I have 2 song examples in there that are rhythmic hits, nothing that our God can't do. And so this is how I would one way I'd express this, either for myself or for somebody else. Okay, we all know the hit, right, of that song that goes somewhere, before the 3rd chorus or something like that. So it's, there's nothing that, 1 E and a 2 E and, okay? 1 E and a 2 E and. So I'm emphasizing the actual hit, and I'm saying more quietly the rhythm that is not hit, but it helps me subdivide in my head to be more precise with my timing, okay, that which is hit. Does that make sense, okay? And then there's another example there with I Believe. So that's another rhythmic hit that you'll see in our chart. That one goes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, sorry, let me try again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay? So again, it's a tool. It's a tool. We have these things that we can do for ourselves or for others to help internalize. That's what we're trying to do with the counting. We're internalizing what that rhythm is. And then the last page, I think, is a 6/8 rhythm. So that rhythmic hit there is one of the most popular that we'll have in 6/8 music for our songs. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 5, 6. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 5, 6. So in the very, very last line, I gave you a little drum notation, okay? Kick is always on, if that was like a treble clef, kick is on the F space, and then the snare drum is on middle C. That's how, if you see drum notation, that's what that would look like, okay? So that would be, everybody know that one, right? Okay. Okay, so speaking of rhythmic hits, let's just talk really quick about how you would maybe want a drummer to play this, okay? Also, the concepts I'm going to give you are maybe not just for drummers, but other musicians as well. It's very similar. The first thing I would say is, it's pretty self-explanatory, we want these rhythmic hits to be accented, okay? Just give them a little bit of oomph to them. And with these, you should also hear a contrast between the rhythmic hit and a beat or a fill, okay? Sometimes your drummer will actually play the right rhythm, but it will be sort of in the context of a groove or a fill, and it might work kind of, but it's not going to have the musical impact maybe as if you stripped everything else away, which is the next thing, leave space. You stripped everything else away, and you just say, hey, just play that rhythm and nothing else. Don't give me any fills or chatter in between the notes. I was just kind of thinking of what maybe you would hear. And I've probably even done this before, and then I was like, why did I do that? There's nothing that our God can't do. That rhythmic hit is basically just a cymbal hit. Okay? But maybe you have somebody that's like, that's okay, that works, but it's almost more powerful. Again, we're trying to create this musical contrast. And I think this works even great in worship music because there's a lot of repetitive things going on, and it's nice to have this break happen, that just separates it from everything else. So have your drummer leave space there. Now, with a fill, the drummer can fill into the rhythmic hit or out of the rhythmic hit, okay? Because a fill is something it's a transitional element in music. It's going to take you from point A to point B, and it's going to anticipate in a musician's mind and in the audience's mind that there's a change coming. Oh, here it comes, and that's what a fill does, okay? So there's nothing. So here I'm filling into it, and I'm also, and each one of those phrases I'm seeing as like a thing. Gun, gun, gun. That's the first one. Second one. So I'm filling into each one of those, okay? And that's pretty much, we all know that. We know that's how the record goes. But that's one way your drummer can play fills around it. And maybe you want him to play a fill there. Maybe you as a worshiper are like, hey, can you play a fill there, something that's going to fill in the gap? And as far as, the sounds that the drummer would play, obviously, there's the crash and the kick, okay? Need to be together. Just make sure if your drummer's playing a crash cymbal, just make sure there's a kick underneath it, okay? There's only a few times I'll do a crash without a kick underneath it. But, another way they could do it is to double up on maybe the snare and the tom. So that song, I Believe. Okay? It's nice to have with no cymbals there, because then when I do hit the cymbal, it's like boom, I've made a change there. The song, I think it's Son of Heaven, we have the... Know that part? Son of Heaven, I got the song right? Okay. So there I'm giving a kick drum with the toms to give it a little bit more accent. So if you're not hearing that from your drummer, say, hey, can you just play a kick on all toms together to give me that impact that we're looking for. All right, speaking drumese. So this is maybe when we want a drummer to play a specific thing on the drums. So a specific groove or a specific fill. And these are just some ideas I have that I kind of got when I was putting this together. And this is something you guys can do because you all have rhythmic coordination. You all play an instrument, you all have to play rhythms. You all have good steady tempo, right? And you don't need a drum kit to do this, okay? So two things, kind of self-explanatory, but I'm going to kind of maybe give you some ideas of how to do this. So the first thing is just to vocalize a drum sound to your drummer, okay? So there's been a couple times when I've been on stage, either playing drums or hearing somebody else explain what they want their drummer to do. And I'll hear something like, yeah, it's like, kick drum and the snare drum hit after that, and then like a doon, and then there's like another snare drum hit, and then we're into the chorus, okay? And then I'm like, okay, I have no frame of reference for what that means at all, okay? I don't know what that means. So there's no rhythm knowledge with that. And so one thing we can do is obviously just try to emulate it with our sounds. So on the drum kit, the kick is the lowest voice, okay? So we want that to be dun or gun, okay? That's what I use, a dun or a gun sound. And snare drum is the highest voice typically on the drum kit, so it's gonna be a ka. It's gonna be something high. And then if you want to put toms in there, you can. Dun, 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 okay? And if you want to emulate a tom fill, you can pitch the toms in your voice, okay? So you guys are all better with your voices than I am, so you guys should be great at this, right? And for a cymbal sound, that would just be like if you're fed up with somebody or a situation, you're just like, psh, right? You're just like, psh, forget it, So that can be your cymbal sound, okay? So take like a groove like This Is Our God beat. Okay, we all know that song. So this would be the beat for the pattern for the chorus. So it can just be simply like doom, do ka, doom, doom, ka, doom, do ka, doom, doom. That's a little fast. This is our doom, do ka, doom, doom, ka, doom, do ka, doom, doom. And I'm not making it complicated, but I'm getting across to the drummer the groove that I want them to play because maybe they're just playing something totally different on that. Okay. What's nice about vocalizing the drum sound is that now you have your hands free, right? So you can play your guitar. You could guide them into where you are in the music. You can snap the click, doom, or doom, doom, ga, doom, 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 ga, doom, doom, ga. You could stomp on your foot the click and play your guitar. So there's different things you can do to mix it up here, and that's going to get us into the next one, talking about stomps, claps, and snaps. Okay. So with this, think "We Will Rock You," right? Okay. Anybody can do that, whether you're like, even if you're like a drunk person at a sports game and you're not a musician, that comes across really powerful, right? So, do this in the same way, okay? So if you do it with with stomping and clapping, so the same groove, this is our God. This is our God, this is what he does. He saved us, this is our God. Okay, very simple. Now you can sing it, you can give a lead, and they can follow along with that, okay? A couple things you can do with that. Or it can be a combination of those things where, let's say I'm trying to teach that hit from There's Nothing Nothing That Our God Can't Do, okay? There's nothing, ga, 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 psh, psh, psh. There's nothing, ga, 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 psh, psh, psh. Got my click going here, okay? So these sorts of things, if I'm a drummer and I'm seeing the worship leader do that stuff, I'm like, okay, I'm on, you're cool, okay? I'm gonna listen to that. That's pretty cool. And again, it's nothing where you need a drum kit to do. You don't need to have any other special things. And this is something you can practice. You can practice this with the click at home, if maybe your spouse is like, what the heck are you doing over there? Oh, I'm just beatboxing. Jeff told me I should, So, all right, let's talk about what to listen for now in a drummer. This could be for the audition or the rehearsal. I'd say the first thing is going to be obviously their timing, right? We want a drummer to be able to play with a click because that's something that we know we have to do. 99% of our songs are to a click, okay? So the first thing is just like, we know when they're going to get off a click, right? We know when a drummer is off the click, they're rushing, they're dragging. It's just like cocoon, cocoon, and it's really difficult. But a couple things to think about that is, are we listening also to the precision of how they're separating notes within that, okay? Or are their notes uneven, okay? Are their beats uneven? So these are things that you can listen for and be like, oh, tune into it a little bit. They're kind of with the click, but it's just not like straight 16ths, where the 16ths are evenly separated. A lot of what we do is, Manny uses the term very technical now, okay? We're to a point where everything's to a click. Everybody quantizes their drums in the studio, and that's what it takes. The drummer needs to be practicing with the click and doing that to emulate the style that we're going for. Another thing with timing to think about is how, and this is not just for the drummers, again, this is for everybody, is how is everybody interpreting the click track? How are they playing to the click track, okay? So this is something where typically I'll find that if a musician maybe isn't with the click exactly, and I'm included in this, typically we're rushing a little bit on the click. The only time I really hear someone drag is when they forget the note that they're playing, then they remember it at the last second, and then it's slightly off the beat. But typically I'm gonna find that a drummer or a musician is gonna rush the click a little bit. So I might coach a person and say something like, hey, and I don't know that I would do all this stuff, on the bandstand, during rehearsal. This might be some type of situation you might coach them if you're mentoring them or something like that. Is just to say something like, hey, guys, let's let the click pull us along, okay? Let's let the click kind of guide us and kind of relax back into it. So there's a physical thing that goes on when you're relaxing, okay? And that doing that sort of thing is going to allow you to lay back a little bit on the click track. And you'll know you're there when you can't hear the click anymore, okay? In the studio, they called that burying the click. Like the best drummers could bury the click. They just played it to the click, and it's exactly like it, okay? That's actually not behind the click. That's actually right on the click, actually. If they're playing and you can't hear the click, that means they're dead on it. But that's what we're looking for. We're not necessarily looking for somebody to be behind the click. We're looking for it to be right on the click. And another reason we want that is because, it's going to make the music feel good, but it's also going to be in coherence with the rhythms of all our loops, all our backing tracks are all quantized and to the grid, so to speak, okay? So just listening for timing is going to be real important. Talking about feel in regards to like straight or swung. Is a song straight or swung? So like 99% of what we do is going to be straight, okay? Do we all know what I mean by straight with the feel, straight feel, okay? But some of our songs are swung. Firm Foundation is an example of a song that's swung, or it has a little bit of swing. Sometimes there's variances of swing, and that one isn't fully like a triplet swung feel. It's a little bit, maybe a little bit straighter than a triplet feel, but it still has a swing to it. It has this kind of bounce and lilt to it. So one of the sections of that song has this tom groove to it early on during the builds or the verses, okay? So when the drums come in. So if I was to play that straight, that's okay, but it's not what the song needs. Because if everybody else is swinging, the guitar and the other instruments, it's not going to sound quite right. So to add a little swing to that, again, so I'm going to show you straight. This is straight. So I would maybe play that tom groove. You hear that little straight one I put in there? So the drummer is great on that too, and he knows when to switch it up a little bit. And then there's those hits that are straight, right? So that goes to straight. So there's a lot going on in that song. It's definitely one that you might want to audition on to really push your drummer and see how they do on that. So that's the feel, straight versus swung. Arrangement, okay, this is kind of pretty basic stuff. Do we know when our drummer enters the song? Might be different than when you start playing, okay? And do we know how they end when they drop out of the song? So that's obviously something that we want to listen for anybody. And overall dynamics as well for a drummer. Do we all have a drummer that plays too loudly? Does everybody have a drummer maybe that plays too loudly? Okay, that's probably the typical thing that you would see. But sometimes you have a drummer that maybe plays too quiet, and you're not really picking up on it because they're not playing too loudly, but maybe if you can ask your drummer to dig in a little bit. I had this happen to me in a studio at Berklee one time. This is like one of my very first times in a recording studio at Berklee. And the sound engineer said, hey, could you dig into the drums a little bit more? It's going to help the time out. And I was like, what do you mean? And I did it, and I felt like I was more locked into the click because I was being a little bit more forceful and just kicking in. And the band could hear that the transients of what I was playing were just punching through a little bit better when I was doing that. So that could be, a feel thing when you have your drummer dig in a little bit. Or it could be just like, hey, when you hit this drum, at a lower volume, it's not going to speak the same way, as if you dig in a little bit, So I think that could be something to consider when you're trying to figure out, like, what is going on here? Or maybe you have a drummer that's too static. Maybe they're just too flatline in their volume. It's super consistent, but it never really changes. So typically you want to have, when you reach a point in the song that, like a verse or a chorus, the energy is going to kind of plateau a little bit. And then it's going to maybe get up a little bit to get to a chorus, from a verse to a chorus, okay? And then we have bridges, which is a little bit of the exception because they kind of grow gradually. But maybe your drummer is just, the bridge of that song is not building, and that's something you're like, why is this not going? Maybe they're not dynamically building it there. So look out for that. That could be too static. Because I talk so much about consistency of volume, but when I mean that, I mean during a section of this song, okay? Another thing that happens that again, is more of a nuanced thing for drummers is to think about the volume between the voices of the drum kit, okay? So in this style of music, kind of kick and snare, I think, are king. They're the loudest voices. They're kind of like the meat and potatoes of our backbeat, our groove of our songs. And then right under that is maybe our toms, okay? And then cymbals are a little bit below that, depending maybe on what type I'm playing, okay? A good drummer is going to be able to sit down to any kit, and they're going to be able to play it and adjust what they're doing right away. They're going to go, okay, this cymbal's really loud. I don't want to hit that too loud right there, okay? One of the things that I've seen in certain drummers that have come in is that their cymbal works really loud, but maybe their snare drum isn't very consistent, okay? It's kind of quieter. And another thing when playing the snare drum, so when we have the snare drum backbeat, just straight across the board, I think like mezzo forte to forte volume, if you want to think of like strict musical terms, and also to hit it consistently in the center of the drum, okay? Because when your drummer is kind of moving around the drum, and they may not know this, okay? I know I even lessons in my 20s, there's guys like, hey, you got to hit in the center of the drum all the time to get that consistent tone of what you're looking for in the snare. Because listen to the difference of quality of sound here. Okay, that's exaggerated, but it does definitely change when you're moving around the drum. So you might have. So that's dynamics between the voices of the kit. Okay, so beats and patterns. There's typically 2 or 3 beats or patterns per song. Almost always 2, and I'm speaking again in worship music. Verse is going to have 1 pattern or beat. We can also call these grooves too. Hey, that groove, you know, that word works interchangeably with beat and pattern. But there's typically 2 or maybe 3 in a song. And when I'm learning a song, and I would encourage maybe your drummers to do this, some of them that are maybe, you ever have a drummer who's like, I didn't play that 2 measures just like the record. Did you hear that? Sorry about that. Or do I need to play this just like the record? The thing I'm going to learn like the record is typically that I'm going to spend most time on is obviously the arrangement, but also the beats and patterns. I want to play them pretty much exactly like the record, okay? Because that's really creating that backbone, that rhythmic backbone for what's going on during the verse, during the chorus, okay? And I'm going to try to be consistent with that. I may not have the same drum fills, this or that or the other thing, but, and if the bass player is learning his part, we're going to lock in right away. There's going to be no problem. There's not 2 drummers on stage, you know. I don't have to worry about what another drummer's playing. It's not the Allman Brothers. And the bass player, there's no 2 bass players either. We do have like maybe 3 guitars and a keyboard player where they're all kind of playing in that same register, and maybe there's like, hey, we need to know who's playing what here. But typically, you know, the drums and bass, I learn it like the record. But in these patterns, so let's take the verse pattern versus the chorus pattern. Those should have some kind of difference between them, okay? So let's take a song like Praise You Anywhere. And I'm going to play the drum pattern for the verse. Let's listen to that, if I can remember it. Okay, so that's like the verse pattern. The chorus pattern is this. Okay. Can anybody tell me what's the difference between those 2? Open and closed hat. Great. What else? What's that? Kick is different. Right. Okay. Anything else that's different? That's pretty much it. What's the same? Snare pattern's the same. Snare pattern kind of brings the weave together on the pattern and makes it like make sense in the song. But we have this open quality to the chorus. Open hi-hat, crash ride, okay? So that's one of the differences. The pattern's different. The kick pattern is different. So, you know, we have 4 on the floor, and then we have syncopated grooves, so I'll talk about that in a second. But there should be some kind of difference between the verse and the chorus going on there. If it's not, then it's just going to feel like, again, we're not getting, you know, we think about the chorus. That's our theme, that's our message of the song, so we want to, like, highlight that. Here's something, though, with that. Let's take that groove specifically. This is something I was thinking of that might be helpful to share. That pattern has that little offbeat on the snare, okay? And it's kind of cool. It's kind of like the ID signature of that groove, right, though? But maybe you have a drummer that just is not hitting that, and it just doesn't sound tight because it kind of needs to be like right in the pocket there to have it feel good. So what are some things I could, if my drummer was not getting that, what are some things I would maybe say to him? And you kind of felt like, oh man, it's that offbeat, they're just not getting it. What was maybe something you'd tell them? Like maybe you, because you know it's not grooving at that point. And maybe you've dealt with this on this song, I don't know. So one thing you can do is just say, hey, play it straight. Can we try that? Let's simplify this a little bit. So maybe you just say, I'm on the chorus. So I'm taking out that note. I love having that note in there, but maybe that's going to be the best situation. Or another thing you can do, you're noticing that there's a lot going on in the hi-hat. That might be a little bit difficult for your drummer. Okay, to do something like that. So maybe say, hey, can you, instead of playing a 16th pattern, it's going to be easier, I think, for them to play it straight eighths on the hi-hat with just one hand. Okay, so that's just something to try. Maybe that wouldn't work on that song, but that's just another thing you can do to simplify the groove for them. And what we're trying to do is trying to still keep the essence of the groove that's going on, take out some notes, simplify it, and make it easier for them to play. Another thing, okay, so that's two or three song patterns per song. Every pattern I see, I see this trend, is going to be a 1 or 2 bar repeating pattern. Okay, now let me show you what I mean. So there's that song that I just played. Let me play that chorus again. That's the first measure. Okay. On the second measure of that, I'm adding some notes to it. I'm adding that little snare thing. Because it's not there in the first measure. Okay, almost sounds like a fill, but it's actually kind of made into a pattern now because it's done so often. You ever hear Ticket to Ride by the Beatles? That becomes no longer a fill. Now it's more like the groove of the song. Let's take the song like House of the Lord. So that chorus groove is, that's the first measure. Here's the second measure. Then both of them together. So that second measure has that 3E, 3E on the kick drum. So I'm adding one note. So you just kind of see these trends. But what we want our drummer to do is to be consistent with their pattern that they choose for the verse or for the chorus. So we don't want them to continue changing the pattern up. But this is where, you know, our job comes in to know the patterns going into the song. Like, what is the chorus pattern? Can I hear that? Are we listening to maybe on Planning Center where you can hear that drum track? Can you sing that pattern, what they're doing? Okay? We all know what 4 and the floor is, right? I don't need to go over that. So a syncopated or broken beat, that's what I just played. So you can say like a funky type beat or a syncopated beat. That's when the kick and the snare are kind of going off each other, okay? And they're not landing together necessarily. So that's what we mean by syncopated. A couple things on snare groove, okay? If we have a snare groove going on. I tend to think that I like to play that stuff more quietly. So I have think like Gratitude, okay? Okay. A couple of drummers I've seen play that will keep everything kind of a higher stick height, and I'm not hearing a differentiation between the backbeat and sort of that little roll sort of chugging along nicely on the underneath it. So that's just another thing to think about. It's like, hey, when you're doing that marching snare, keep the backbeat strong on that and play that marching stuff a little bit quieter. But you can call that a snare groove, call that a marching groove. I think your drummer is going to understand what both of those is. Possibly just marching, they'll go, what's a snare groove? Well, a marching groove. Oh, okay, it's marching groove. Tom grooves, yeah, tom grooves. I'm going to show you, I don't think I have time to do this. I was going to show you how to play a tom groove, but maybe I'll have to wait till do that another time. But I want to talk just about builds in general, and like how you can have your drummer build so it's going to work out for the song and, you know, do the musical device that we want to have happen and do it well. Your drummer might be playing it kind of like the record, but it's just not like building correctly. It just feels, again, it feels static. It feels like it's kind of like here. So a couple things to think of with that is, hey, can we just like, that first section, let's just lay out. Even if there's drums there, just say, hey, let's just lay out for that section. And maybe that second 8 bars, just give me kick. And then that third 8 bars, just do your tom groove that you've been doing, and that could work fine. Okay, so any sort of manner of that, or maybe like the first time through, just kick. Second time through, do the tom groove. Third time through, and this is another thing you can have your drummer do is, and it's great to know like when the snare comes in and what beat the snare comes in. Okay, when your backbeat comes in, it's usually going to be on 2 and 4, right? So if it's tom groove, that would be. Or it's maybe just on beat 4. What I can do is I could start adding those things and say, you know, the third time you play it, add the kick on, add the snare on beat 4, and then the last time you play it, add the snare drum on both beats 2 and 4, and give me a crash on beat 1 every time you come out of that. That's pretty simplistic, I think, but something that's going to add to that energy. Okay, so that could be helpful if your drummer is maybe, you know, struggling to kind of build things up and get to where we need to be. Pocket and feel. So this is kind of like the height of where I think we look for in a musician even is just like, do they have that like sort of artful and soulful, you know, connection to like the academic areas of music. So, you know, it's a combo of like your timing, it's dynamics, it's their touch on the drums. It's also like their, what I would call like their beat and rhythmic integrity, you know, is what they're playing gelling with the rest of the band. And just one thing to think about with this is a pocket can be made better if it's just a little less busy, okay? So have them strip away notes, but again, think about like the essence of the groove. You know, kick is always going to be on 1, you know, typically on all our stuff, snare drum on 2 and 4, and then maybe what's in between. Think about that for pocket. For your drummers. Just a couple things on stylings here, on maybe some terminology that might be helpful. So, and you might already kind of have an idea of what this is. So think of like closed and tight versus open and full, okay? So you can use a terminology in a verse to your drummer, say, hey, can you play that more tight or more closed? And typically what you're explaining is like how the hi-hat is, okay? So on a verse, it's usually going to be closed hi-hat. The hi-hat is tighter and it's closed, okay? And so that's kind of what that equates to. Open and full would be an open hi-hat, kind of like that, what I was doing with the song Praise You Anywhere. Okay, could be on the crash ride as well. Okay, so that could be like the full sound we're looking for. Cymbal work, okay? This is where I go to a campus and everybody's got a different terms for cymbal work that they want you to do. So I was up at Clark Summit and Sarah used the word, so cymbal tinkles. Everybody, all our people know what cymbal tinkles are. I'm like, okay, that's a new one. But you can have your own terminology for this stuff. You get your whole team on it, have it become more fun. But I like the word tinkle because it's kind of like it means soft and delicate, right? You know? Some washy stuff, get a little washier. That's maybe different than tinkles. That's actually, so you can use that term. One thought with swells, okay? So I often hear you guys, you know, asking me to play a swell into like the intro of a song, or like, you know, after a down chorus, swelling back into a section, and that's great. Again, that's another like one of those transitional elements that helps us take us from point A to point B. One thing on the drums though, sometimes I'll be asked to play a swell, and I'm actually playing something else at the time, and I don't want to like stop the groove, and it's hard to do both sometimes. So just be aware, if your drummer is actually playing the groove, they're not going to probably be able to play a swell at the same time, because on a swell, I'm thinking 2 hands with sticks. Be able to do that properly, and if I'm grooving, then I can't really do it. So like sometimes during V&O, I'll hear like swell, swell up, swell up. Maybe like I would say maybe build up, because if I'm on like the kit, and I first of all, and another thing, I can't swell at all when I'm playing this thing, because those sounds aren't really gelling together. Like one is organic and one is electronic, and it's just the sticking is difficult as well. But if I'm on the kit, playing, stuff like that, a fill, and then like a little cymbal work, and that brings, I think, the build that your drummer will need to like accentuate whoever is giving the V&O at that time. Does that make sense? So can't do both of those at the same time. So snares without snares, with no snares. This is another thing. It's kind of like playing mallets on your toms, but this is something maybe you're just not thinking about, that can be a nice, delicate moment for your drummer to do. So that song, 1,000 Hallelujahs, the way I hear it is not all toms at that part. I'm hearing the drummer playing. So there's 2 things that happen. You're introducing a new voice to the sound of what's been happening, the whole set, which is kind of nice. It's like, oh, what's that? Oh, that's kind of cool. You're also, when you take off the snares, you're removing that sympathetic vibration that's always there, Even, when I hit a tom, you can kind of hear what's going on underneath the snare. I've kind of worked the tuning, so there's not a lot of sympathetic vibration, which is hard to do sometimes. But when you take off the snares, you're basically opening up this more earthy vibe to come in that can be really nice to create a new bed that, again, it's going to be a contrast from what's come before. So maybe ask your drummer to do that sometimes. Hey, can you take the snares off for that section and do that? So one thing to think about. Another thing is shakers. So I kind of sound like a hypocrite because I haven't played shaker in a while, but I saw a drummer do it recently in Mannheim, and it was just during like the during a lighter section, a verse section of a song. So have your drummer get one of these. This is like a Rhythm Tech Studio. It's like a little bigger than a toilet paper roll, but has a really nice sound to it. I typically don't use the egg shakers. The egg shaker things. They're kind of like pointy sounding, but these are kind of nice. They're a little full. The mic, and how that for the verse or some section of the song. It's going to sound nicer than the shakers we have in our backing tracks typically, because it's going to be like, oh, you're going to sense it coming from a different area on the stage, and you'll notice a difference. The people in the house will be like, oh, that's cool. That's a nice, delicate, and you can see the drummer doing something as well, which creates like interest as well for everybody. That's all I got. So. Yeah. Any questions?
What exactly is Amen, Brother?
Okay, Amen, Brother. This is just kind of a fun thing. I came to this conclusion in my mind recently because the tom groove in worship music is very it's so, I don't know, just in every song that we do, it's in so many things. And I was like playing the rhythm, and I have a drum video where I show how to do a tom pattern. And the Amen Brother is a song from 1969 from this band called The Winstons. And they are a really good funk band, but not well known, except for this 6-second sample in the song Amen Brother, okay? And it's one of the most sampled pieces of music in history. Up there with Funky Drummer by James Brown, okay? And it goes like this. I'm gonna just try to play it. It's kind of faster, but let's see if you've heard this before. Okay? okay? Does it sound kind of familiar to you guys? Yeah. And I feel that that's in our collective musical subconscious as people. A lot of times a new drummer will play, like they'll start learning like grooves, okay? To me, that's one of the grooves, maybe not as fast as that, but it's gonna be something similar to that, like this. And that's just like slowed down and changed slightly. Maybe I'm taking out one of the kick drums in there. But if you take that pattern, okay, and you change the kick drum pattern from to 4 on the floor, and you take your right hand and you put it on the floor tom, and you take your left hand and you move it from the high tom to the low tom, and maybe getting a snare once in a while, this is what you get. That's amen, brother. So, but that shows you, I think, too, how, and I think this is, that one video that I did is one of the more viewed videos that I have, but I think that it shows you that some of the things we do on the drum kit aren't as difficult as they sound. And that's, I think, the key to like, maybe any instrument is to doing something that sounds cool, but it's easy to play. But, you know, taking... If you listen to the tom groove, I've seen drummers come in and play and do this different sticking to it that it's kind of interesting, but it's not necessarily emulating totally what you're hearing on the record. And that's why I kind of did that. I was like, this is maybe easier than what you thought it was, okay? And I think, and the reason I also wanted to show you that, because I feel like you guys could play this now. If I had you guys come up and play this, you probably could do it, okay? So that's what Amen Brother is, okay? So.
I used to go about coaching on working on grooves, different grooves. Like, is there like a library of grooves? Be like, hey, listen to this.
Different ways to coach on grooves. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I didn't mention that I think is going to be important is I think there's 3 important grooves, okay, that if you're auditioning to get your drummer to do. Are you guys doing 2 songs in your audition? I think that's what we typically do, 2 songs. To me, there's like the up-tempo 4/4 song. There's the slower song, like a song like Holy Forever, okay? And then there's a 6/8 groove. So in the audition, I want to catch all 3 of those, I think. And so if I have a drummer play an up-tempo 4/4 song and then more of a ballad song, I'm probably going to have a click track there just in like Ableton where it's going to be like a 6/8 pattern. And I'll probably just have them play to that, without any song, because I want to know that they can do this. It's a little bit different, than a 4/4 groove. And I may say something like, give me like 4 measures of a 6/8 pattern and then play a fill into the same thing. So play a fill at the end of that 4 measures and then go back into the groove. Now, if they don't know what measures mean, I may just say like, play it for like 15 seconds or so, do a fill in 6/8, and then come back in on the 1 and keep playing the groove, okay? Because then I know that they can do it, okay? You want a drummer to be able to play a groove and then I was in a country band once, and he's like, hey, can you play a different change-up? He called it a change-up. It's like, oh, you mean a fill, yeah. I want to make sure they can do a change-up back into the groove. And so those are three grooves that are important. So you want to make sure, I think, your drummer can do that. Now, in a 4/4 song, and with that, too, syncopated grooves, and then 4 on the floor, okay? So as far as, like, if there's a library of, Donovan, of grooves, I can't think of anything right now.
I probably should have said patterns.
Patterns, okay. Yeah. You want your drummer to be able to do, like, this groove. That's if this is like the like groove 101, then groove 201 is going to be that where the right hand has to separate itself from the kick drum. Okay, that took me. I remember when I was first learning how to play drumkit, that was like the first like hurdle for me was getting that. And that's when you get into the syncopated thing. So one thing you can do is in Planning Center, I've done this for drummers, I'll create a Planning Center document just for them or just for my drummers, where I'll pick 10 songs or 5 songs, and I'll say, these are the grooves that you need to know, okay? Listen to these songs, listen to these patterns. I mean, that can be something that can be helpful for a drummer to get the song before they get the song, you know what I mean? Like take you at your word, that's a hard one. That's not as intuitive, or that's atypical to what we typically have. You know, it's a different kind of thing.
What do you hear as the number one thing when you go to campuses that our drummers do incorrectly? Or the number one way that they can derail or detract from singing?
Yeah, I don't know of a number one thing that comes to mind. I don't know. I'd love to take that question around here. What have you guys felt? This could be like a good open discussion here. Anybody, what do you notice on your drummers? What are you struggling with? You know, timing, inconsistency of the groove, attack on the drums. Touch on the drums is a drummer thing. You know, anybody can sit down and play, but that's one of the things that takes like a lifetime, a lot of practice an experience to sit down and be able to make the drums sing when they play and be consistent with it. You know, so that's definitely something there. Form, yep.
I often hear drummers ending the song after the rest of the band.
Yes, I've been guilty of that. Yes, yep. This is one of the reasons. This is one of the reasons for me. You know what's different for a drummer, I think, than a singer is that a singer is going to maybe more easily remember how many times through a section than a drummer. Why? Because I know I'm singing this line 4 times through or 5 times through. I'm thinking sometimes more like measure repeats. I can also think like in terms of lyrics too, but sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, is this the 4th or 5th freaking time during this song? You know, I'm just lost. So one of the things I'll do is I will put a count off into the very last hit. That'll tell me, and I'll go into Ableton, and no one will see me do that, but that'll cue me to make sure I know when to end there. But yeah, form is a big one there.
Challenge is probably adrenaline. Like when they get on the stage, even if they play great rehearsal, that morning adrenaline kicks in, you get excited, people are engaging.
Yep.
And
Yep.
they take off.
Yeah.
So
Huh.
just kind of honing that in.
Yep.
Keeping them disciplined to just kind of contain that energy and use it wisely, continue to play dynamically.
Right.
That type of thing.
I noticed, Jordan, you guys have a lot of sugar snacks in the back there, dude.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That might,
Always just before we go out.
I know. Put some Benadryl in there, dude. that might help. To me, that's an experience thing too. I had a guy tell me, every time I go out to play on stage, my arms feel rubbery, you know, and that's like a real thing, you know, those nerves kick in.
I can kind of speak to that a little bit too.
Yep.
As a drummer who gets very too excited and gets out of hand, I found that I hear a lot of like, oh, I've practiced this stuff and then I get really excited and then I just black out. I've actually tried this with myself and found it successful. Like, your drummers are going to get excited because they love to play music, and any of your musicians. But steering that excitement to something different helps a lot too. So like something with myself that I get excited about on stage is locking in with the bass drum or the bass player. And like suddenly that shifts them from going, I'm excited because I'm playing drums and I'm going to throw in this cool fill, to like, I'm getting really excited because I just locked in with my kick drum with the bass drum, and now we're like locked in a pocket together. Yeah. And like that kind of helps. You're not stifling the excitement, you're steering it into a more productive angle.
I think one of the things that I do sometimes is when you get on stage, there is a little bit different sound dynamic because now you have an audience out there and it actually changes your mix. Okay, you ever notice that? And then you're thrown off a little off kilter because of that. And I tend to like a lot of house in mine because I want to feel like everything. This is how it works for me. When people come into the room, it's actually more dead. That's what I wanted to say. It's actually more dead. You do have people singing and stuff, but for me, it's more dead. So in rehearsal, I do the opposite of that. I turn up my audience mics more so that, because I know it's going to be more dead when people get here. And when it's more dead, and I was just experienced it more like epic and huge, I'm like, what's wrong? I'm not feeling that. So I want to try to get my audience mics happening. I don't like feeling when I'm playing on stage, I don't like feeling like I'm in some kind of small room. I want to feel the energy of the room coming back on me. And that's another thing that changes. The front of house volume changes, and that changes how it sounds in my ears as well. So I got to be aware of that, that change. And those little things can, I think, oh, crap, what's going on here? Why am I, that can affect the whole band, really.
Hey, Jeff,
Yep.
This past weekend, we had something where, hello.
Hello.
This past weekend, we had something where the click went out.
Okay.
So we were just like, all right, power through this. Just any thoughts on coaching your drummers through, hey, if that happens and there's no longer a click, it's all on you, bro. Like,
yep. So that could go one of two ways, possibly. When I set my mix in my Aviums, I tend to have a lot of click, and I don't have a ton of other band in mind. I tend to have it be click, loops. My perspective is if I'm grooving with the click and the loops, and I know that music in this genre sounds good when the drums are quantized and I'm playing right with everything, that it should feel pretty good, okay? But if that happens, I'm kind of hosed, right? I have to go over, and I this has happened when I was playing, in Mannheim a lot. I turned Matt's guitar up because I know he's leading, he's singing, and his singing is going to be in time with what he's playing in guitar. So I want to turn up his acoustic guitar and his vocal, and I'm going to follow that like a sequencer. Okay, so that's just something to think about. Ask your drummers, like, do you got enough of me? But again, that's more work on my shoulders to go over and crank up that acoustic guitar and lock in and relax. Because when the click, my tendency is to rush, okay? That's my natural tendency, is to rush. And so I know I need to relax at that point and just be like, okay, don't think about it too much. Just keep playing, okay? And relax and keep going. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to be like, come off the stage like, oh, man, the click went out. Yeah, you guys hear that? And like, really? It did? I didn't notice it, So it just don't think about it. Don't get nervous about it. Just keep playing your part. If you know the song, that's another thing. You got to know the song to keep playing through it. But yeah, that's like scary moments, I think. Why is your click stopping? Is your click stopping because Ableton's crashing or?
Well, this weekend, I think what happened was he might have triggered the wrong loop.
Oh, okay.
And then something, we were in the song.
Okay.
So we can't even start it now.
I gotcha. Yeah. There is a feature if you started the wrong song, then you're probably at the wrong tempo. But if you get off the click track, there is a feature that I've programmed into our MIDI, these devices here. So you guys all know that this is the volume for the backing tracks. If you have this active button on and it's red, then this fader is controlling everything but the click track and the count off. Okay? Yes. So that can be a handy feature if you get off your arrangement of the song, but you want to still stay with the click. Like somebody, your singer like skips like a verse or something. You keep the click going so you can stay in time. But then at the end of that, you're going to have to like mentally go, okay, we could just cut out 8 bars, or maybe we just added some bars. Then you got to cut the click so the new song doesn't go in, and your drummer will have to manually start the next song, right? So that's that. What's that? And bring the loops back gradually. Yeah, I'll be over there. I'll be like, I've brought this up like gradually over time. But that's kind of a cool solution to that problem. So,
So my question
Yeah,
is,
man.
what do you suggest is the best way to tell or coach drummers to bring drums into a song that either have very little or no drums at all when you want to create a different sound or a different dynamic to it?
How would I coach that?
So like for, I guess this weekend, for us, we're doing Speak. Very little to no drums, but yet you still want, if you still wanted to bring dynamic to that song and coaching a drummer of saying, hey, instead of you just not being on the stage or you sitting up there and doing nothing,
Right.
like how would we, add some type of simplistic groove? How would we add a stylistic moment to that?
It's going to depend on your drummer and where they're at, I think if you have some ideas, like 2 or 3 options in your head of like what they could play and keep it simple, then, that's going to probably work better than pop. If it's a drummer that's maybe a beginner drummer, okay? If you have a great, awesome drummer, then you just like, hey, man, just play something that's going to work for this song. But if you have a drummer that's, our drummers, our teams, they work very hard at practicing. To throw something new at somebody in the moment might be a little intimidating. So if you have some ideas like, hey, you're going to just start like, just give me like 4 on the kick. And then like if it's like Speak, is that like more of a acoustic-y, delicate song? That could be like a brushes thing, It could be something very simple too, like ride cymbal. Like have you ever just have the drummer play ride cymbal during a song on brushes or something like that? Or ride cymbal and cymbal swells. So have a couple ideas in your head of what that could look like and try some things out.
I'll often try to find like a reference to like either of that song, like in a way, or find another song that has a similar feel that I like.
Yeah.
That I could pass along as just a reference for that drummer to get an idea.
That's great. Yep.
Drew, you could also like do it in Logic too. Like if you have an idea, that's what I often do is take like a section of the song and then just program drums into that and then send it to my drummer.
That's next level, Ebony. Dang, that's awesome.
Hey, guys.
Did you guys hear that? That's what she's doing as a worship leader for her bands. That's awesome. I know you're doing it. I know. So yeah, that's a great idea. Wow. Yep, creating your own fully produced track of what they should play. Yeah, mastered. So, all right, I'm going to let you guys go. It's 3:15. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it.